The armed forces of Ukraine entered the enemy's rear and delivered a devastating blow. The Russian army has significantly intensified its attacks in the Zaporizhia and Donetsk directions. Trump has had a change of heart and is resuming military aid to Ukraine. The European Union is about to introduce the most powerful package of sanctions against Russia in its entire history. In Iran, they are preparing to assassinate the American president, while at the same time Trump has been nominated for the Nobel Prize. China is openly facilitating the production of strike drones for Russia. The port of Rotterdam is being prepared for war with Russia. Greetings! My name is Anastasia Dmitrovskaya, and right now, here are the main stories. But first, like this video if you support Ukraine, and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose each other on YouTube. And now to the news from the front. Russia may break through the defenses in Donbas. According to the New York Times, citing military analysts and Western intelligence, Russian forces may be close to fully capturing Donetsk region by breaking through Ukrainian positions on the approaches to Kostiantynivka, the last major defensive stronghold in the area. According to their data, the most critical situation is currently unfolding on the southern approaches to Kostiantynivka. The city serves as the southern gateway to a chain of towns that form Ukraine's last major defensive line in the Donetsk region. If the city is lost, Russian drones will be able to fully control the northern part of the region, which could lead to the gradual capture of the rest of Donbas.
Russia currently controls more than two-thirds of Donetsk region, but in order to capture the rest of the area, it must seize Ukraine's urban centers, which are vital for its army's logistics. If the city falls, almost all towns further north will be within range of Russian drones. This would bring Moscow closer to its long-sought goal of capturing the entire Donetsk region.
In addition, Russian troops have already launched an assault along the entire front line in the Zaporizhia region, attempting to reach the highway to Mariupol and capture Orikhiv by the end of the summer. This was stated by the deputy commander of the 65th Brigades Battalion, with the call sign Forest.
The enemy has been tasked with reaching the Mariupol highway, then cutting off the logistical supply routes to Donetsk, capturing, for example, Orikhiv, advancing to Kamyansky, and possibly in the future reaching Komishuvaka. That's why the enemy has these objectives, and I believe the enemy will continue these assault operations throughout the summer.
But the Russian army is fighting not only against Ukrainians, but against all living things. These scenes are simply heartbreaking. A video is going viral online showing a Russian drone deliberately killing a red-listed pelican. For no reason at all, they took the life of an innocent bird. And now, a bit of positivity from the next video. This is a story about how a group of Special Operations Forces approached from the rear and carried out a successful raid on a Russian military position near the state border with Russia. Thanks to thorough preparation, coordination, and professionalism, our defenders achieved their objective. The result was the elimination of enemy personnel and the capture of trophies. Ukrainian warriors are titans. I never get tired of being proud of them every day. Give them a like of support under this video and write a few words in the comments. We know for sure that they are watching us. It's not trouble for you, but it means a lot to them, especially when words of support come from different countries around the world. We've been waiting for this. The Pentagon has announced the delivery of additional weapons to Ukraine. This was stated in a message on the website of the US Department of Defense. Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell said that the aid is being provided with Trump's blessing.
At President Trump's direction, the Department of Defense is sending additional defensive weapons to Ukraine so that Ukrainians can defend themselves. Meanwhile, we are working to ensure a lasting peace and to put an end to the killings.
Let me remind you, on the 1st of July, White House Press Secretary Anna Kelly confirmed the U.S. decision to halt the supply of certain weapons to Ukraine following a review of aid by the Department of Defense and support from other countries. On the 3rd of July, Donald Trump stated that the United States will continue to supply weapons to Ukraine, but they must ensure that their own stockpiles remain sufficient. On the 4th of July, Volodymyr Zelensky had a phone conversation with Trump, and it appears that the dialogue was productive. As Politico reports, the US may resume supplying certain types of weapons to Ukraine after meetings between top US and Ukrainian officials, which will take place this and next week. According to the publication, President Donald Trump's special envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, will hold 2 meetings with Ukraine's defense minister Rustem Umerov in Rome at the International Conference in support of Ukraine on the 10th of July and 11th, and then in Kyiv next week. At the same time, the key issue of the discussions will be the resumption of aid deliveries, which were halted at the beginning of this month.
The United States has informed Kyiv that the supply of engineering equipment and some armored personnel carriers will resume in the near future. However, no exact dates have been given yet.
Well, let's hope that this time these are not just words and that the aid will actually reach Ukraine and won't be frozen. The head of Russia's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, has urged Russians not to take Trump's statements seriously.
Medvedev called on people not to pay any attention to Trump's rhetoric and to continue pursuing the objectives of the special operation.
In fact, the reason for Medvedev's outburst against Trump was the latter's statement about resuming arms supplies to Ukraine. Indeed, this decision was also not well received by Putin's press secretary Dmitry Peskov. Supplying weapons to Kyiv, says Peskov, does not align with efforts to promote a peaceful resolution. In addition, the United States continues to implement anti-Russian sanctions, while Moscow considers these very sanctions illegal, as they harm entrepreneurs in both countries. The European Union is preparing to impose the toughest sanctions against Russia since the start of the full-scale war. This was stated by French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot on the air of the French television channel Kyiv 1.
Europe, based on French proposals, is preparing to adopt the toughest sanctions in the past 3 years, which will directly deplete the resources that allow Vladimir Putin to wage war.
According to Barrot, the new restrictions may affect Russia's revenues from oil exports, as well as financial structures that help circumvent existing restrictions. In parallel with the EU, the United States is also working on new sanctions. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham reported that the U.S. Senate is preparing to vote on a new sanctions bill after the summer recess in Congress. According to him, the document will allow for the imposition of sanctions and tariffs against those countries that support Putin's war machine and trade with the empire of evil. Well, we're waiting for all these sanctions, if only they'd come sooner. Now that's some news. In Russia, former governor of Kursk and former transport minister Roman Starovoy was found dead. The Russian dictator Putin dismissed him from his post on the 7th of July 2025. Starovoy was found dead at his home on the same day. The body was discovered in his personal car in a prestigious suburb near Moscow. A firearm was found lying nearby. This was reported by the Telegram channel 112. The preliminary cause of death is suicide.
Former Russian Minister of Transport Roman Starovoy shot himself in Odintsovo. Source: 112.
Some Telegram channels report that the pistol with which Starovoy allegedly shot himself was an award weapon from the Ministry of Internal Affairs of the Russian Federation. And it's entirely possible that this wasn't a suicide at all.
Be that as it may, the possibility that he was eliminated, considering that he lived in the Russian Federation, seems more plausible. The shot Starovoy had an award weapon that was issued to him by the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs. A clean job.
Rosmi in turn writes that the suicide may be connected to a criminal case that was opened against Starovoy the day before.
According to preliminary information, Starovoy's suicide may be related to a possible criminal case. According to sources, former head of the Kursk region Alexei Smirnov, who previously worked as Starovoy's deputy, testified against Roman Starovoy. Smirnov himself was arrested on suspicion of embezzling 1 billion rubles during the construction of defensive structures in the Kursk region.
Others link his death to the fact that while serving as Minister of Transport, he failed to handle the transport collapse at Russian airports during the crisis that unfolded there amid the Ukrainian drone attacks. And what do you think, was it suicide or murder? Share your thoughts in the comments. China has helped Russia establish mass production of drones. This is reported in a Bloomberg article.
Documents meticulously reviewed by Bloomberg extensively show that Chinese suppliers play a truly key and significant role in consistently providing Russia with essential components for the ongoing production of their strike drones, which are actively used against Ukraine.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's main intelligence directorate reports that in Shahed-type drones, which Russia is currently using to attack Ukraine daily, the share of electronic components made in China has risen to 60 to 65%. And what is important to understand is that all these supplies are happening in circumvention of sanctions.
The supply of components is carried out both directly and through chains of intermediaries, including companies in Hong Kong, Turkey, and the UAE. Among the Chinese suppliers involved are major manufacturers, including those who officially claim to operate only in the civilian sector. Some of them supply components to Russia under the guise of equipment for agriculture or aerial photography. According to the report, drones with Chinese parts are being produced at Russian enterprises, including facilities in Tatarstan and Izhevsk. Assembly is carried out both under an Iranian license for the Shahid model and as part of localized development.
China, for its part, officially denies providing military assistance to Russia.
In light of this information, the U.S. and its allies are considering strengthening export controls, but they acknowledge that workarounds through third countries remain a vulnerability in their sanctions policy. China officially denies providing military assistance to Russia, but in reality maintains a high level of technological exports, including dual-use goods.
And most likely in the near future, there will be no real chance to close the loopholes in sanction policies that allow the Kremlin to ramp up drone production.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
The main intelligence directorate of Ukraine has named the Russian war criminal involved in the strike on the Ohmatdyt Children's Hospital in Kyiv. In fact, exactly 1 year ago, on the 8th of July, the Russians struck the Ohmatdyt Children's Hospital in the capital with a missile. At that time, 33 people were killed and more than 120 were injured. Ukrainian intelligence reported that Major Denis Shinov of the Russian Armed Forces was responsible for the technical preparation of the Kh-101 cruise missiles used in this attack. It was Shinov's unit, the 121st Bomber Aviation Regiment, that carried out the attack on the Children's Hospital. At the same time, the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine reminded that every war crime committed against the Ukrainian people will be justly punished. Personally, I am convinced that this major doesn't have long to live. Ukrainian special services have a long reach and do not forgive such things. This is truly shocking content. Just listen to this. Iran has started raising money to hire a hitman for Donald Trump. Iranian cleric Abdulmajid Karagani has launched a website where he announced a fundraiser for the assassination of US President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In fact, the man claims that with this money they would be able to hire a hitman. In fact, this is reported by Telegraph.
In a recent interview, he explicitly stated that a significant fundraising campaign has been officially launched for the assassination of Trump and Netanyahu, further adding, "In various European countries, they typically do this for approximately $10 to $20 million.
As the publication writes, this Iranian cleric does not hold a prominent position in the religious hierarchy of the Islamic Republic and has little official power, but his views reflect the stance of certain radical groups. Karagani noted that such operations should be planned together with the Iranian intelligence services. However, he is convinced that civilians must take direct part. The clergyman also claimed that civilians should participate in efforts to assassinate enemy leaders, stating, "Killing the heads of the enemy is not only the responsibility of a military commander. The public must get involved and make this sin dangerous, so that people like Trump and Netanyahu would not dare to make bold statements." Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has nominated US President Donald Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. Netanyahu made the corresponding statement during a state dinner at the White House in Washington on the 7th of July. Netanyahu handed Trump a copy of the letter he had sent to the Nobel Committee.
"This is the letter I sent to the Nobel Committee. This nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize is fully deserved by you, and you should receive it. Thank you very much. I didn't know that."
And what do you think about all this? Write to us. US President Donald Trump stated on Sunday that countries supporting the anti-American policy of BRICS will be subject to an additional 10% tariff. About the seriousness of this contender and which countries in fact are being referred to, our next segment.
US President Trump stated that any country supporting the anti-American policy of BRICS will be subjected to an additional 10% tariff. A few months earlier, Trump had already threatened BRICS with 100% tariffs.
BRICS was created with a bad purpose, and most of these people are afraid to talk about it. But I told them that if they want to play games with the dollar, they will face 100% tariffs, and they'll come back and say, "We beg you, please don't do this." BRICS was dead the moment I said that. Obama and Biden used to say that they're keeping us on edge. No, we're the ones keeping them on edge.
24% of the world's GDP comes from just the United States, while the BRICS countries, if we add them all together, account for over 30%. So, in theory, BRICS could dictate terms to the United States from a position of economic strength, obviously.
This statement was made in response to the declaration from the latest BRICS summit in Brazil, where they criticized the new Trump-era tariff policy.
We express serious concern about the increasing unilateral tariff and non-tariff measures that distort trade and do not comply with the rules of the World Trade Organization.
On the one hand, we have the BRICS summit communique, but on the other hand, it is so soft towards the United States that they're even afraid to mention the states there. So in fact, this shows that while there seems to be a union, it is somehow losing its global agency.
Trump is so vocal against BRICS because he is dissatisfied that the countries involved want to overcome the dominance of the dollar in favor of their own national currencies.
The use of national currencies in trade between our countries is steadily increasing. In the year 2024, the significant share of our national currency, the ruble, in the currencies of friendly nations and countries in Russia's financial settlements with other BRICS member states has impressively reached a substantial 90%.
Now, when he talks about an additional 10% tariff for BRICS countries and those that support such a policy, in reality, ideologically, this is not different from his political threats to do everything possible to prevent the policy of de-dollarization from succeeding, to ensure that the dollar remains in its leading position in the world so that people do not continue to abandon it.
At the same time, the American president is trying to establish separate tariff conditions with each BRICS member, particularly with Russia and China, in order to undermine their unity.
By the way, the significant fact that President Xi Jinping did not personally attend the recent BRICS summit is, according to the considered opinions of some international relations experts, partly connected to the very recent and notably specifically positive and constructive agreements and diplomatic understandings reached with the United States of America. In other words, Xi did not want to get personally involved in this situation right now.
Nevertheless, experts agree that no matter how strong the BRICS countries may be, they will not be able to displace the dollar or American dominance in the global market just yet.
Europe's largest port is preparing for war with Russia. In fact, journalists from the Financial Times report that Europe's largest port, Rotterdam, is preparing for a possible war with Russia. The port has already started reserving berths for ships carrying military cargo at NATO's request and is planning supply routes in case of a Russian attack. In addition, so-called amphibious exercises will be held in Rotterdam several times a year. Goodwin Simmons, the executive director of the Rotterdam Port Authority, stated that the port is coordinating its actions with neighboring Antwerp on how to handle the arrival of British, American, and Canadian vehicles and cargo, according to the Financial Times. "We are seeing each other less and less as competitors," he said regarding the coordination with the Belgian port. According to him, if a large volume of weapons arrives, Rotterdam will turn to Antwerp or other ports to have them handle part of the cargo. As the saying goes, if you want peace, prepare for war. And what do you think about these measures, just in case, or is the EU actually preparing for a real war with Russia? Let us know in the comments. Hit the like button to support this video and what we do. And be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss our next episodes. See you soon!